Starting now, I'm going to make the New Year's resolution of being more active on my YouTube channel. And to keep telling myself that.
So, 2018 was a year. I mean, we've had Bethesda nuke the fridge and turn it into a laughingstock, there are now classes that teach Fortnite dances, and some YouTubers have hit a big low and dug deeper, but overall, I'd say that 2018 wasn't too bad of a year. After all, it did give us some amazing games, and this is where I'll step in, since unlike a good chunk of other years, I actually played enough games from 2018 to make a list like this. Now keep in mind, I did not play every game that came out in 2018, and this is purely ranked by how much I enjoyed the games, rather than which one is technically better. I do not have time to look into objectivity, nor do I want to look like the know-it-all, so let's just go with what we got. We know that many were overjoyed when good old Cash Manuka came back, and because the Insane Trilogy sold well, it opened possibilities for the futures of many series from the days of old. One of which happened to be the question if Crash's PS1 sibling, Spyro the Dragon, would ever get the treatment too. Well, sure enough, he did, and I honestly could not be happier. I was thinking long and hard of whether or not I should include the Reignited Trilogy on this list, since they are just PS1 Spyro games with a graphical overhaul and some tweaks, but I decided to include it because the next game I'll talk about on this list is technically a remake, and because I have not played the original Spyro PS1 games, I missed out, I know. But I'm glad I got the chance to play the Reignited Trilogy. With the notes I took about the original games, based on what I've seen from them and what I've heard from a lot of my internet buddies, Toys for Bob's did an amazing job recreating this classic trilogy. All the levels are the exact same design-wise from the originals, but with the graphical overhaul and perfect control from Spyro, they all feel new and fresh, encouraging you to use your abilities to explore them and find whatever secrets they may hold. And since this is all in one package, they made Spyro's control consistent across all three games. He's got the right amount of weight and speed to make exploration easy and fun, and rarely goes overboard on one aspect. And there's even some tweaks from the PS1 games to add on to this, like the games giving you some commands on other buttons to add more versatility to how you want to play, some mechanics from later Spyro games being added into Spyro 1, the playstyle of the other playable characters in Spyro 3 being tweaked a bit, among other things. Oh, and how about those graphics, everyone? I mean, all they had were PS1 games to work with, but they went all out into putting as much detail and life into everything as possible, even adding in some touches that really didn't need to be there, but are welcome regardless. But the two reasons why the Reignited Trilogy isn't any higher at the end of the day, on top of being a big graphical overhaul, but details, is that it remained loyal to the originals to the point where some of the problems were inherited, like Spyro 1's bosses being unacceptable, and some missions being as annoying as being in a room with a whining kid, and the fact that I would have liked a bit more secrets not present in the original games to be here, like maybe a secret playable character in Spyro 1 and 2, maybe some hidden levels, the works. But overall, the Spyro Reignited Trilogy is something that every fan of Spyro is bound to fall in love with, and newcomers are likely to get into. And since Crash is going further with the remasters, maybe Toys for Bob's could do more with Spyro in the future. Maybe make the Spyro game that Enter the Dragonfly was meant to be? Yeah, I think Spyro fans want that corrected. Newsflash, everybody! Jack the Lightning Ripper likes Pokemon! I'm not surprised by the lack of shock reactions. It's a series that I've grown up with, and a series that has continued to impress me to this day. And while we didn't get a main series installment in the same area as the previous games, we did get a little experimental one called Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, a game that is technically a remake of the first generation that happens to combine elements from the main series with that of Pokemon Go. And I have to say, despite some weird choices, I'm happy how it turned out. It might be weird because this game does lack some mechanics that Pokemon has had for a long time, like abilities, held items, and some other things, but as I was playing the game, I came to realize that it was just fine without these. The game is basically the purest definition of what Pokemon truly is, going on an adventure to catch Pokemon and become the best like no one ever was. In fact, while on that, I know that devs heavily advertise some things being reminiscent of Pokemon Go, but the way I see it, the only Go thing here I see is how you catch Pokemon, which really isn't that bad, all things considered. I mean, sure, the motion sensors can act a little questionable at times, but really, this catching mechanic was executed pretty well. Another touch I really like is that you can now see Pokemon roaming around in the world, which not only makes the locations in Kanto feel even more alive than before, but it also makes finding certain Pokemon way easier and way more fun than before, especially when it comes to caves. The variety of Pokemon you can catch certainly helps that. I mean, heck, not many main series Pokemon games let you catch starter Pokemon in the wild. But not only does this game work as a Pokemon game with Go mechanics, it also works well as a good remake of the first generation. I mean, sure, it doesn't escalate anything to new and meaningful degrees like Oras did with Ruby and Sapphire, but it does paint Kanto in a light that I've wanted to see for a while, and some of the more memorable moments from the original game actually got shown in a different way that make them even more impactful. There's honestly not much more I could say about this game. It may not be as good as a lot of recent Pokemon titles, but it is a lot more streamlined and still a lot of fun, and I definitely would like to see some of its elements brought to the main series, namely Pokemon appearing in the overworld. That was a blessing that I've been asking for a long time. Going back to franchises coming back from hiatus, let's hear it for our Blue Bomber! I, like many others, was confused when Mega Man had a second hiatus between Mega Man 10 and now, given that both Mega Man 9 and 10 were considered successful. Maybe the dark age of Capcom history has something to do with that. But regardless, we wanted to continue the legacy of Mega Man with some games of a similar style, and regardless if they were really good or fell flat on their faces, it constantly raised interest in bringing Mega Man back again. And as time went on, we got multiple Mega Man collections that introduced new players to the series, and in 2018, they breathed new life into the series with the number 8 on this list, Mega Man 11. If Mega Man were to come back into the light, I'm seriously glad he took this approach. While Mega Man doesn't control that much differently to how he did previously, though I am happy he got a slide and charge up back, it really feels like the devs built the levels with those in mind. They all make use of what Mega Man can do without feeling completely outdated, while feeling very loyal to the rest of the classic series. Even though you can beat them in a similar manner to the other games in the series, they do want you to use this game's newest mechanic, the double gear system. This mechanic can either overclock your firepower with the power gear, which I mostly use with special weapons, or slow down time to make some platforming challenges more comfortable with the speed gear. All of these can be very useful in the game, because while it isn't gut-bustingly hard, unless you go on higher difficulties, it will be keeping your skills in check. I also love the special weapons in this game. They're all very creative, very useful in obliterating enemies, and some can be used for different purposes. And like I said earlier, the power gear makes them even better. The bosses are awesome as well. They're all generally challenging, are constantly throwing surprises at you, and are really fun to fight overall. So yeah, despite some shortcomings, I thoroughly enjoyed my time with Mega Man 11, and if you want to get into the series, I would very much recommend this one. Now let's just hope there is no third hiatus.
You know your game's great when you got this guy as your announcer.
Your soul resonates with the darkness.
I'll be real with you here. I never knew what Soul Calibur was for quite a while until I've heard some YouTubers talk about it. From that point on, I became interested in trying it out, 2 and 4 especially, but with all the games I wanted to play, I just never got around to doing so. But then, I got my chance. And it was when the series saw a grand revival. When this game was first shown off, I knew I wanted to get my hands on it, and I got it in the coolest way imaginable. You know that video contest I entered a while back during my college semester? I actually won that. I got to choose my prize for it. I chose this, and yeah, you can put the pieces together from there. But how is it as a fighting game and as my intro to the series? Well, simply put, excellent! While Soul Calibur V took quite a few steps in the wrong direction with the cast with little charm and far more limiting fighting mechanics and gameplay options, Soul Calibur VI decided to head back to the basics and build upon what worked in earlier titles. The combat feels especially well balanced in this game, being very easy to learn, yet very difficult to master. No matter what playstyle you go with, you can really invent your own way of fighting, and the game will really reward you for whatever defense or offense you can come up with. It's definitely not the most simple on Earth, but it's a lot easier to learn than many other fighters out there. I also took a fondness towards this character roster. Sure, it's not the largest roster out there, and most of the characters are returning, but it makes up for that with their qualities. Every returning character they chose has their own distinct charm that really grows on you, and the new ones are just as much fun, especially Aswell. But let's be real here, the character creator really stole the show. The game itself was great, but without this, it would not be the same. The options they give you are crazy, and you can pretty much go nuts with whoever you want to make in the game, and whatever match you want to create. I personally like showing the Sith Lords how idol girls get work done, yet the closest thing we'll get to a Disney crossover fighting game, write my own ending to Avengers Infinity War by making Thanos play Sega Saturn, and do whatever this is. I don't know, this game makes too many situations possible. There's honestly a lot more I could go on about. I haven't gotten to the story mode starring your own avatar and the DLC out now and on the horizon, but I'd rather this video not last the rest of your life, so I'll just say this. If you like fighting games and want more to your library, or if you just want to try out the series, please get Soul Calibur 6. Let's show Namco some love and hope this leads to more great things from the franchise in the future. I always love those times where you decided to get a game purely based off what other people have said about it. I mean, that could be a gamble sometimes with you not being able to get in the game as much as other people, but other times it can lead to you actually discovering something you are very happy to have picked up. That's what happened to me when I decided to give Celeste a shot. I do not regret that because man did this game hit that sweet spot in me perfectly. The platforming in this game is very well done and really satisfying to do since while it gives you plenty of breathing room, it never gets too easy. In fact, it's quite the opposite. This is a hard game, but it's not hard because of artificial means like throwing a crap ton of obstacles at you at once. The game is difficult because each level comes up with creative challenges that see how well you can utilize your dash and grab maneuvers, how well you can position yourself, and how well you can utilize your environment to really think outside the box. And even though you will be dying a lot, I never actually felt annoyed by it because you don't suffer much punishment for it anyways. You're just back to the beginning of the room you died in, meaning you can get back to where you died in no time. And with this type of game where everything kills you in one hit, I think this was necessary. And wow, a really engaging story for once. Even though this is a platformer and a strong narrative wasn't necessary, they actually made one that is very emotional, focusing on life aspects like panic anxiety, self-depreciation, and learning to work with the negative aspects about yourself while giving some characters that are lovable and memorable in every way. Theo is a good boy, I shall not hear otherwise. Top that off with a beautiful art style that makes brilliant use of pixel art and simplistic colors, a soundtrack that is nearly perfect, some surprisingly good bosses, and solid replay value in the form of collectibles, and a secret chapter that changes up some mechanics, and they all come together to form one of the strongest indie titles in years. And here's the cooler part. Aside from a couple people working on the game's art and a composer to create this game's soundtrack, Celeste was made by 2 people! Yes, the game's director and designer, Matt Thorson, and programmer, Noel Berry, worked on the majority of the game by themselves. It is crazy to think about how a game made by 2 people could turn out a lot better than many titles released by many bigger and more experienced teams out there, let alone win Best Indie Title at the Game Awards. That is a serious accomplishment if I ever saw one. Believe it or not, even though I love Celeste and it is seen as the best indie game of 2018 in the eyes of many, it's actually not my favorite indie title from this year. 2 other ones actually managed to win me over more. The first of which happens to feature a chicken pile driving and suplexing stuff. I'm happy to know that this is a part of our timeline. Now here is taking a great concept from a previous game and expanding upon it in a sequel. Guacamelee 1 was fun and all, but it did have some flubs that prevented it from going beyond just a good time. But here comes Guacamelee 2 saying, "Oi amigo, I can take what you established and crank it up to lucha levels!" And yeah, that's pretty much what Guac 2 did. The story is not only bigger, but it is also a lot funnier and even more charming. The world is a lot more memorable and fun to travel in. The combat feels like a refined version of the first one, and I love what they did to the chicken form. In the first game, the chicken form was basically a way to get through tight spaces, but now it has a moveset of its own for not only kicking the crap out of enemies, or pecking depending on how you want to look at it, but it is also a way to explore more of the world and discover secrets. Heck, there are hidden levels in the world that use just the chicken form, and it is a very welcome change of pace. I also got a kick of the new abilities one can get to mess around with in his normal form. These abilities, both new and returning, not only make level traversing even more fun and diverse, but the game gives you a ton of challenges that really test your capabilities of using them. And with these abilities, the game becomes genuinely hard for the right reasons, especially when going for 100% completion. And on top of these unique and fun designs for levels, the bosses feel so much more creative and fun, even if there's still only a few of them. I love how the upgrade system was streamlined and gives you a lot more to work with. And there are some secrets in the world that give clever nods to other games and gaming genres. No, I'm not talking about the images referencing other sorts of media, I mean something else entirely. I'm not going to spoil them here, they're best experienced going in blind. Guacamelee 2 is a masterful Metroidvania and a masterful beat-em-up in one package with funny and clever writing, wonderful presentation, and a whole lot more. And even though I recommend you play Guacamelee 1 before this, I do not want anyone to miss out on this gem. Ever since Shovel Knight came in and left a resounding impact on gaming as a whole, many games have gone for a retro style calling back to the games of old, like Mario, Sonic, and Mega Man, and a fair amount of others. I guess they wanted to strike while the iron was hot. And while a lot of them are good games, there was one retro-styled indie title that I played last year that just flat out hooked me from screen one. A game calling back to Ninja Gaiden of all things, The Messenger. Holy cow, I was not expecting to love this game as much as I did. I knew this game was great based on what I've heard from some YouTubers I watch, but surprisingly, this game is just pure bliss. And the first sign of that bliss comes to the controls. The movement and jump are really slick and give you plenty of time to react to upcoming obstacles, as well as go as fast as you can. I mean, you are a ninja after all, and those have a license to run fast and jump high. But just because you're acrobatic and speedy, as well as being able to gain extra jumps in midair by hitting things, doesn't mean blitzing by everything is a breeze. In fact, it's the complete opposite. This is a hard game, because the levels are constantly changing up the way you approach obstacles and enemies, and will require you to react appropriately to different situations, especially when it comes to the upgrades you get as you progress. But thankfully, it never gets to a daunting point, because as the game begins, it gradually gives you room to experiment with what you can do and eases you into the challenge the further you go. Not to mention, the checkpoint system can really help you keep going, and there's no lives, so there's not a whole lot of punishment, but the game still wants to see if you are capable without holding your hand. But the levels themselves are more than linear paths to speed down. They also give you room to explore and find things like alternate routes between levels, tons of time shards, which are basically money to buy upgrades, and power steals that can get you a secret upgrade and are needed for 100% completion. There's always incentive to find secrets because rewards will be waiting for you on the other side, especially in the second half where the game decides to open up a lot more. I won't go too far deep into that because doing so will reveal some gameplay spoilers, and I think those are best suited for your discovery and not me telling you. The bosses are wonderful at testing your speed and observation, the game looks visually wonderful, the soundtrack has a treat to the ears. Yeah, this is a fantastic addition to the retro throwback indie titles. Even though this game is hard, it's the exact hard I want to see out of games, and everything else is just so much fun for me to stop playing it. I wholeheartedly recommend this game because it is, to me at least, the high point of indie games from last year. Square Enix has probably had the most hit or miss times around here. I mean, they do have a crap load of potential and have released some outstanding games, but at the same time, they made some terrible business decisions, cancelled any future plans with Final Fantasy XV DLC, and made The Quiet Man. Case in point. So with all that's been happening to them recently, what was the gem they made that warranted this talk? Well, a callback to their RPGs of the SNES era with twists that feel refreshing. Occupant Traveler could have been a cash grab capitalizing on their older days, but instead Square, with the assistance of Acquire, made a well-balanced, enthralling, and just downright wonderful RPG. When it comes to the story, well, unlike other RPGs, there's no giant plot that ropes this one together. Instead, these are all journeys of 8 separate individuals concerning their own state and how they evolve from it. This can be cumbersome in practice, and while it does have a few snags, it actually works out pretty well, mostly because the characters have good reasons for going on an adventure, and you care and sympathize with them. Like Primrose both wants to find her true place in the world and take down the people who murdered her father, Ulrich wants to go and avenge the king he served from a traitor, and Elfin just wants to help everyone in need. It's moments like these that really make the main party so lovable and the world more interesting. Gameplay supports this too. The world is sprawling with things to discover, quests to complete, and enemies to battle. The combat works because of the constant layers of strategy they keep giving you. It's just the right amount of thinking that won't overwhelm the player, nor encourage them to spam anything, like what is that creature weak to, when will be a good time to stun them, and when should I save this skill or that skill. There's a lot to consider, but it's unlikely to get confused with any of it, and when you find the right strategy to win, it truly does feel satisfying. I am happy I got a chance to experience this wonderful game. It calls back to previous Square RPGs without losing its identity, constantly changes things up to test what you know about the game, and kept me engaged on each character's story. And that's a sign that this is truly a magnificent journey.
This is a Spider-Man video now!
I have always had a fondness for Spider-Man, but this was the year that I became even more of a fan of him. I mean, he literally got a role in one of the biggest movies of last summer with Infinity War, and didn't feel so good in the process, had his own incredible animated movie that was funny enough made by the same studio behind the Emoji Movie, funny how things work out sometimes, and he had his own video game on the PS4. And it's freaking amazing! I knew the PS4 Spider-Man game was going to be really cool when somebody showed it off at their E3 conferences, but lord, did this game blow me away on so many levels. From the word go, the game just goes ahead and lets you have access to Spider-Man's powers. No Peter getting bitten by a radioactive spider, no him humiliating Flash, no Uncle Ben getting shot, just pure, unadulterated fun that makes you, insert phrase literally every person who has reviewed this game has said. Yeah, even though that phrase has been used a jillion times, it is the truth. The game does an amazing job in putting you into Spider-Man's shoes. The web slinging feels just right, and actually feels like you're actually swinging through the city of New York, rather than going through a watered-down simulation of swinging that gets old after a while. The combat is also heavily reliant on your acrobatics and how fast you can react to situations, but it never gets to a cheap state, even with guys like giant bruisers or flying enemies. And as you go along, you'll not only be able to get upgrades to make battles easier, but also secret weapons that make combat and stealth more enjoyable, and more suits that pay homage to Spider-Man's legacy, and gives you extra moves to play around with. Oh, and the photo mode is easily one of my favorites in any modern game. Taking shots like this will never not be amusing. I also was not expecting a complex story either, but here we are. Rather than be a simplistic story of Spider-Man going around stopping people, the plot is actually more focused on one big grand scheme and dives into each motivations of the characters. You know that Peter has been living hard lives as both himself and Spider-Man, but he's always trying his best to give his full effort to everything and everyone. At the same time, you understand where the two main villains of the story are coming from and somewhat sympathize with them. This plot actually gets really heavy later on, but never to a point where it's taking things too seriously. It knows what to portray as a massive deal and what to have fun with. And for a game about Spider-Man, I'm glad they pulled that off. Sony and Insomniac went all out with this one, and it massively paid off in the end with immensely positive reception and very strong sales. But that begs the question, will this influence future superhero games? Will someone be out there look at this and think to do a similar thing with another superhero? Only time will tell. Before we get to number 1, here's a couple games from 2018 I also played and liked, and some games from past years I enjoyed as well. Kirby Star Allies, God of War 2018, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, Tales of Vesperia, Icy, and Mega Man X4. I tried to find reasons to put another game at number 1 instead of this one. The game I'm about to show here may seem like an obvious choice to some, but I don't think those people will blame me considering how much this game blew me away. So without further ado, settle in and smash. Everyone is here? Well, you're goddamn right about that! Sakurai knew he wanted something special for the Switch, so he unleashed a 76-ton gigabomb of hype! And I'm still feeling shaken about it. Everyone from previous Smash games came back for this big slobber knocker of a title. Snake, Wolf, the Pokemon Trainer, Cloud, Young Link, Pichu! No, seriously, who thought the likes of Young Link and Pichu would ever come back? Well, not only did they come back, but everyone is rocking brand new tweaks to make them even more enjoyable. Pichu's actually the fun this time. The Pokemon Trainer feels a lot more fluid than he was in Brawl, especially when it comes to switching Pokemon. Shulk could switch out arts without scrolling. Link got a Breath of the Wild makeover. I'm just getting started here! And the newcomers breathe just as much life into this game as the rest. Ken, Chrom, K. Rool, Simon, and surprisingly Richter. Mr. Who's Too Big for Smash Now! Having these characters on the roster is just pure bliss. And in terms of smashing, I love the additions to the rules that let you play on each stage as originally designed, have their hazards turned off, or play them in a Battlefield or Final Destination format, as well as have the matches be damage percent or stamina based, so nobody gets left behind, especially when it comes to the sheer number of stages and the fact that you can fight on multiple of them in a single match thanks to Stage Morph. Classic mode is also one of the best in the whole series, and while the online definitely has quite a few things to be ironed out, I still do love the ability to play with your buddies. And then there's the big boy, the World of Light. Truth be told, I thought this mode was a blast. The sheer amount of spirits you can come across and recruit is staggering, and I love how they all spice things up with their own challenge that reference a game they were featured in, even if some are about as appealing as anything below a C- on a report card. The dungeons this mode packs are also fun to explore, the bosses are wonderful, and honestly, this mode is a ton of fun. I have honestly just scratched the surface in terms of what this game has to offer. I mean, with all it has now and more content on the way in the forms of Piranha Plant and freaking Joker, it's hard to put everything it has into words. The game delivered everything I wanted and even more. It's Smash Bros. The way I know and love it, it has something for everyone, both casual and competitive, and it is hands down my favorite game from 2018.
I'm the Lightning Ripper, and with all the gifts that Sakurai has given us throughout these past few years, I just want to say thank you, Sakurai. And take a vacation when you're done with all this.
Here where we stand, hand clenched in hand, everyone caught in a struggle. This is the day we find